All right, so think is probably the one that I'm hyperactive in after kind of busting on you for all the movement. Think is where I tend to get stuck and spend lots of time. But think is the proactive stimulation of your mind that keeps your brain youthful and active. So this is anything that you're doing to stretch and grow your mind, whether it's reading, learning new things. My favorite think over the last year that I've been getting into is the Zettelkasten, which is a note-taking system, which has slowed down my reading, but deepened my reading because I'm drawing more out of the books that I'm learning from, rather than just kind of like zipping through as quick as I can and saying I read it. I'm taking the time to process and kind of exercise and contemplate, exercise my mind and contemplate the ideas. So think, what do you got for think, Ken?
Yeah, I think the big thing first is understanding neuroplasticity,
Mhm.
which is really just the brain's ability. If you imagine you have a forest and you walk through the forest, you're going to struggle until you've walked this through the forest the same way over and over again to create a pathway. And that's really kind of the simplest way to summarize neuroplasticity. It's the more we do something, the easier it gets for us to do it. And we used to think that as you age, your brain kind of almost hardened and it became harder to learn new things. And that is not true. Our brain maintains its neuroplasticity for as long as we're alive. But the problem is, if you don't stimulate it, now you have one path through the forest and everything else is just overgrown. So activating and stimulating our brain, doing things that help us learn in new ways are basically allowing you to blaze multiple trails through this forest so that you don't become rigid in your thinking over time. So, so it can be anything. Listening to podcasts. I've been using Duolingo for the last year or so and just learning a second language. And I may never even speak it, but I'm stimulating my brain. There's a learning process. There's apps like Headway is kind of a cool one. They do all kinds of summaries, and you can pick a topic, whether it's business or finances or family or relationships or fitness, and you can do these little 15-minute summaries on that.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Steph.
Blinkist is another app that does that as well.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So the idea is just, again, making it intentional, because especially our work can become repetitive. We have certain things that we do over and over again. That's just part of it. Our lives can become a little bit repetitive, which is also important, certain habits that we form. So how do you find ways to keep your brain developing and strengthening just like your body by stimulating it in constantly new, different, and interesting ways?
Yeah, I was just going to add that the diversity is important. So just doing jigsaw puzzles all the time, there's a benefit, but not as much as doing a jigsaw puzzle and then a crossword and then going and taking a ballroom dancing lesson, and engaging your mind in that way. Now you're also engaging move too, so duplicating your efforts,
Mhm.
but it's finding new and different ways to engage your mind, because if you just keep walking the same paths over and over again, that's not carving new neural pathways. Now you're just strengthening, and then over time, especially as we age, it starts, the pruning starts to almost happen too much, and then you start losing those connections, and that can lead to some of the neurodegenerative stuff as you get older. Speaking of which, with Think, John Medina's books, Brain Rules, are a great resource. There's a lot of great resources out there, but that one is a good go-to. So Brain Rules was the first one, which was just all about this topic that we're talking about. And then he also did Brain Rules for babies. So if you have little ones, that one's, I think that was like 0 to 5, age 5, and the neuroplasticity and all the brain growth that's happening at that time. And then there's also Brain Rules for aging, which is good, especially like I know in my mom's side of the family, dementia runs pretty hot and heavy. So it's something that she actually found that book. I didn't know that he had written one on aging as well, but she found that book because it's something that she's thinking about, and it's something that I should think about as well, because that stuff can be, passed on genetically. So finding that diversity is really important, and studying neuroplasticity is a way to increase your neuroplasticity.
Yeah, you got to treat it just like a muscle. And the other part to that, especially if you're thinking entrepreneurially, if you're stimulating your brain in interesting ways, it's going to give you the ability to borrow brilliance. So sometimes we can get caught up like sticking into our lane and refining our craft, but a lot of times it's things that we don't know, and then we actively go out and figure out how to know them, that ends up influencing all kinds of interesting creative connections basically in your work. And and if you're working for someone else and you're just finding yourself feeling a little stagnant, a little bored, that's the time. It's recognize that that's an opportunity to weave in practices just like movement that wake up your brain, that spark some different things that'll refresh your ability to kind of dive back into the work that you need to be doing. So wake up a different part of your brain for a minute, and that'll refresh you and keep you going in a more focused way.